Do you think humor is more of a factor, I guess, in mate selection than height?
I think they're both important. I think, women seem to have this kind of heuristic or rule of thumb that I want a guy who's at least as tall as me and preferably at least a couple inches taller than me. So if you're a very short woman, that's that's pretty easy, right? Because there's about a 3 or 4 inch difference on average between the sexes. So if you're 5 foot tall as a woman, almost any man will do. Um, I have some cousins, female cousins who are like 6'1", 6'2". If they're looking for men who are even taller than them, suddenly only 1% of men will do, and that's a very restricted mating range. So,
Yeah.
and I've talked a lot about this with my 26-year-old daughter also, who's in the dating market in New York. Um, and like one kind of rational strategy you can do if you're a woman is particularly if you're tall, if you can kind of convince yourself to relax this height standard, this height obsession, it really broadens your mating pool, and then you can focus on all these other traits that you care about. But man, if you go on Tinder and you say, okay, I need somebody, you know, um, at least 6 feet tall who's making at least six-figure income, a lot of men won't fit that who might have made great boyfriends or husbands. And so if you're just using like this one criterion to eliminate 80% of men, I think that's pretty dumb.
That seems fair. I think that isn't that one of the most common search terms on dating apps too, is must be above 6 feet.
Yeah, yeah. And a
Yeah.
lot of women aren't even very well calibrated to like what is the actual average. I think in America, the current male height average is about 5'10". Um, but think about it objectively. Like in the modern world, is there actually any difference in terms of capability as a husband or father between a guy who's 5'9" versus 6'1"? I'm 6'0", so of course I'm a little higher than average, and I think height's good. Height's worked for me. But if I was giving advice to young women, I'd be like, look, try rationally to focus on like out of the traits I think I want, which of them actually matter in the modern world, versus which are just kind of these evolutionary vestiges that really aren't as relevant as you think, right? Because the guy who's like 5'8", who's in shape and confident and can fight and knows how to protect you and your kids, is actually more useful than some, uh, 6'2" lazy dude who's never learned any sports or can't do anything physical, and where you're just getting into like a height worship for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think focusing on mental stability and humor, those are two pretty good traits. And like an IQ, but like you said, that kind of goes along mostly with
Yeah,
humor. But those are the three that I'd focus on. Stability, yeah, humor and IQ.
and
That can get you so
it
far.
can. And those are some of the key things you need if you're actually raising a kid with somebody, right? Sense of humor probably correlates pretty well with um, ability and willingness to play with a kid in a way that's kind of creative and where
Mm-hmm.
you enjoy the kid's company and the stuff they do you find amusing and you can amuse them, and that's super important. And the stresses of parenting, you really need emotional stability and resilience, because
And a sense of humor.
if some guy who's single is already depressed and anxious, just wait till he's like sleep deprived with a kid, financially stressed, feels torn between family duties and career. Like, it doesn't get easier, right? So I think a lot of what women are looking for is they're sort of unconsciously anticipating what traits will be relevant once we settle down, we have kids, we have a household together. What's going to be important to me at that point?
What about for men? Do they like similar traits or do things change?
again, I think men get a lot more choosy about these mental traits in longer term relationships and for deciding who do I really want to settle down with. Um, I think you know, a lot of men, myself included, tend to be attracted to certain kinds of instability in women when we're young, right? Like borderline personality disorder can be extremely compelling and enticing and attractive to men. Um, but that would make a terrible wife and mom. So
What does that look like in in a woman?
borderline is basically women who escalate romantic intimacy very, very quickly. They would fall in love very quickly. They can be extremely charismatic and verbally fluent and attractive to men. They can be sexually proceptive, so they'll actually chase men actively instead of just responding to them. But then once the relationship develops, they'll be often very prone to anger. They'll alternately idealize the boyfriend, but sometimes demonize him. So they can switch from like, you're the best thing ever.
Mm.
I love you more than I've ever loved anybody. 5 minutes later, they can be saying, you're the worst thing ever. I hate you. You've ruined my life, blah, blah, blah. So that's borderline behavior. And it is kind of irresistible to a lot of guys, but once you learn, oh no, that ends very badly, then you know that's not actually going to be a good wife and mother. So guys have to learn also to be wary of that, just like women have to learn to be wary of the bad boys who are kind of on the psychopathy dimension.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what were the other traits?
The men are looking for in women. Um,
Yeah.
I think cheerfulness goes a long way. Baseline happiness level. Like my wife Diana is also an evolutionary psychologist. We've been together a number of years. She's
That's
just
cool.
kind of, she's hyperthymic. She's almost always happy, no matter what's happening. She enjoys life. She is very emotionally resilient. Almost never gets depressed. And that's a very important quality. When you're dealing with, you know, life stressors like parenting and career and moving houses and so forth. So I think happiness and cheerfulness are, my sense is that like Gen Z doesn't really advertise those things because in a way you get more social credibility from
Yeah.
being neurotic and depressed than from being happy, and like being happy isn't cool. Um, but I think for attracting a long-term mate, it actually goes a long way.